She wanted to embrace this connection, to allow herself to experience joy without reservation, yet the echoes of doubt remained. She realized that life was asking her to take a step she hadn't taken in years, to trust, to open her heart, and to risk disappointment in order to experience happiness. The days that followed were a careful dance between desire and caution. Martha found herself looking forward to Caleb's visits with anticipation. Yet she also worried about what might happen if she allowed herself to feel too deeply. The townspeople's whispers continued, subtle but persistent, and her own insecurities surfaced in quiet moments of reflection. She wondered if she was being foolish, if she was clinging to a fleeting hope, or if perhaps she was finally allowing herself to embrace something real. Despite the doubts, Martha began to notice a shift within herself. She felt lighter, more engaged with life, and more willing to take small risks. She laughed more easily, felt more present in each moment, and discovered a renewed sense of curiosity about the world around her. Caleb's presence was a catalyst, gently urging her to step beyond the boundaries she had set for herself, and she found that she was ready to explore what life might hold if she let go of fear. By the end of the month, Martha understood that the choice before her was clear. She could continue to resist, to let doubt and fear dictate her life, or she could allow herself to embrace the unexpected joy that Caleb brought. It was not an easy decision, but for the first time in decades, she felt the courage to hope, to imagine a future where age and expectation did not define her capacity for happiness. Martha Reynolds, once cautious and reserved, realized that life had opened a new chapter for her.
Breaths. "Who are you?" she asked. "Why are you helping me?" The stranger looked at her, his eyes calm and steady. "Breaths. I cannot change the soldiers or the danger out there," he said. "But I can make sure you survive." "That is enough." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of honesty and determination that reassured Ahuli. She felt a sense of trust growing between them. He was not just a stranger. He was a hero in his own quiet way, willing to stand against danger to protect another life. They moved again as the sun began to descend toward the horizon. Shadows lengthened, and the temperature started to cool, but the soldiers were still somewhere in the hills, relentless in their pursuit. The stranger guided Ahuli through narrow paths, rocky slopes, and hidden valleys, using every skill he had to keep them safe. Ahuli followed closely, her trust in him absolute, her courage growing with each careful step. Night approached, and with it, new dangers. Darkness could hide them, but it could also bring predators and unseen obstacles. Narration. The stranger led her to a small cave, partially hidden by rocks and brush. Inside, they rested briefly, sharing water and discussing their next move. Ahuli felt a deep sense of relief. She had survived another day, not just through her own skill, but with the protection of someone who had proven bravery beyond words. As they settled for the night, Ahuli reflected on everything that had happened. She thought of her family, her village, and the danger that had forced her into the hills. But she also thought of the stranger, the hero who had stepped into the shadows to shield her from harm. In a world where fear and danger were constant, he had become a source of hope. Narration. She realized that survival was not just about hiding or running. It was about courage, trust, and the willingness to protect others even when the odds seemed impossible.
He simply nodded, letting the silence convey understanding. After a moment, he said, "Sometimes people don't act because they're afraid or because they don't know better. But it only takes one person to make a difference." His words sank deep into Martha's heart. One person had changed everything for her and Samuel. One person had restored a sliver of hope in a world that had felt harsh and cruel. As they approached a small cluster of trees on the outskirts of town, Red led Martha to a modest cabin tucked away among the brush. It was simple, with a wooden porch and a small garden outside. Sunlight filtered through the branches, casting warm patterns on the walls. It was not much, but to Martha, it seemed like a palace compared to the danger and fear she had left behind. Red helped her inside, setting Samuel down gently on a blanket. The baby giggled softly, his tiny hands reaching for her. Martha felt tears well up in her eyes, this time from relief and gratitude rather than fear. She had never imagined that she could feel this safe. Red spoke calmly, explaining how she could make the cabin comfortable. "There's some food and water here," he said. "You can stay as long as you need. I'll make sure no one comes looking for you." Martha listened carefully, taking in every word. She felt a sense of security she had not known in weeks. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she and Samuel could live without constant fear. Over the next few hours, Red helped Martha organize what little belongings she had managed to save. He arranged the cabin so that it felt more like a home, simple but secure. Martha watched him work and felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had faced the worst moments of her life, and now, because of his courage and kindness, she could finally start to breathe again. "And I chose to help you. That part is on me." They sat in silence for a while. The house felt different again. Not just tense now, but changed. Something had crossed a line. There was no going back to pretending nothing was wrong. "I need to tell you more," Anna said finally. "You deserve to know what you're dealing with." Mark nodded. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "The people I work for weren't just dishonest," she said. "They used fear to control people. If someone wanted to leave, they made it difficult. They spread stories. They pressured. They threatened in quiet ways that were hard to prove." Mark frowned. "That's why you ran instead of reporting them." "Yes," she said. "I didn't trust the system to protect me fast enough. I thought disappearing was safer." "And now they're trying to bring you back," Mark said. "Not for me," she replied. "For what I know." That caught his attention. "What you know?" "I saw things," she said. "Things they didn't want seen. Records. Conversations. Proof of how they treated people." Mark felt a chill. That explained why they were so determined. "You're not just someone who ran," he said. "You're someone who could cause them serious problems." She nodded. "That's why I'm scared. They don't just want me quiet. They want control." Mark leaned back, processing everything. This was bigger than a simple workplace problem. This was a system built on pressure and fear. "That means you can't just hide forever," he said. "I know," she replied quietly. "But I needed time. I needed somewhere to breathe, somewhere to think." Mark looked around his small, simple house, the place he had chosen to escape the world. Now the world had found him anyway. "You can stay here for now," he said, "but we need a real plan." Anna looked at him with a mix of relief and worry. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." "You didn't cause their behavior," Mark said.
Slowly, they began to develop a shared understanding, a language built of glances, gestures, and the occasional broken phrase that somehow conveyed complex meaning. One afternoon, while the surgeon worked to mend a small leak in the cabin's roof, she approached him with a bundle of herbs. She handed them to him silently, her dark eyes meeting his, and he understood immediately. These were medicinal herbs, picked with knowledge and care. He accepted them, grateful, and nodded, impressed by her thoughtfulness and her skill. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes about the growing cooperation between them. As the days turned into weeks, their bond strengthened in quiet ways. She began to anticipate his needs, handing him tools or supplies before he asked. He, in turn, allowed her more independence, trusting her to manage small tasks without constant supervision. It was a delicate balance. Trust had to be earned, but once it was given, it became a foundation for survival. The cabin, once a place of isolation for him, became a shared space, alive with cooperation and mutual respect. There were moments of tension, too. One evening, a sudden storm swept through the forest, the wind rattling the cabin walls and rain pounding the roof. The woman moved quickly, helping him secure supplies and ensure the fire would not go out. Their movements were coordinated, silent, efficient. Yet the fear of the storm reminded them both of how vulnerable they were, even inside the cabin. They spoke little during the storm, communicating through gestures and shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the dangers that could arrive without warning. Food remained a constant concern. Hunting and foraging in the forest were dangerous, and the surgeon had limited experience beyond his own small garden near the cabin. The woman's knowledge of the land proved invaluable. Her groans of pain became less frequent, and her eyes brightened. Elias was careful not to rush her, knowing that patience was as important as skill in the recovery process. The villagers, once wary, began to participate more actively. They learned from Elias, helping to prepare food that was soft and easy to eat, cleaning her blankets and checking on her comfort. Children would watch quietly, curious about the stranger who had come to help one of their own. Some elders shared knowledge about herbs and traditional remedies, which Elias integrated carefully into his care plan. Together, they created a small support network around the woman, a community effort guided by Elias's skill and the villagers' dedication. During the day, Elias also observed the environment. The Apache settlement was remote, built in harmony with the desert landscape. Families lived close together, sharing resources and responsibilities. Water was scarce and every drop was valued. The people hunted and gathered food carefully, used herbs and plants for medicine, and respected the land they called home. Elias was struck by their resilience. He had spent so long in cities and hospitals, surrounded by equipment and schedules. Here, in the desert, he saw life at its simplest and strongest, and he realized that healing was not only about medicine but also about care, connection, and community. One afternoon, as Elias helped the young woman sit up, she tried to speak to him in her own language. He could not understand the words, but he noticed the smile that accompanied them. He responded with a nod and a gentle touch on her arm, signaling understanding. Communication was not perfect, but trust and empathy bridged the gap. Elias began to see that healing was not just physical, it was emotional, and the bonds formed during vulnerability were as important as any surgical procedure. Elias also faced small challenges. The desert was harsh.
"I like seeing you happy," he said simply. "It's nice being around someone who really enjoys the little things." For a moment, Martha paused. These words, so ordinary on the surface, carried a weight she hadn't expected. They were honest, unhurried, and full of meaning. It struck her that Caleb's interest in her wasn't fleeting or shallow. He genuinely valued her company, her thoughts, and her presence. That realization was powerful, and it stirred something deep inside her, a mix of hope, courage, and longing. They spent the next hour tending the garden together. Caleb carefully dug small holes for new plants, while Martha guided him, laughing whenever he made a mistake or joked about his lack of gardening skills. It was natural and easy, like a rhythm they were creating together. For the first time in a long while, Martha felt completely at ease around someone, without pretense or worry. She could be herself, entirely and unapologetically. As they worked, Martha found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone for years. She told him stories from her youth, memories of growing up on this land, and little moments of joy and sorrow that shaped who she was. Caleb listened intently, nodding, asking gentle questions, and never once interrupting or dismissing her words. His patience and genuine interest made her feel valued in a way that was entirely new to her. After the work was done, they sat together on a bench near the garden, watching the sun dip below the hills. There was a peaceful silence between them, broken only by the distant sound of cattle and the occasional chirp of birds settling in for the evening. Martha's heart pounded quietly in her chest as she considered the moment. "Caleb," she said finally, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking. I don't know if I'm ready to let myself feel this."
Her protector led the way, carefully choosing each step. He paused frequently, scanning the terrain and listening for distant voices. Ahuli followed silently, trusting his judgment completely. She had learned to read the signs of the land, footprints, broken branches, scuffed earth, and now she also watched him, learning how he moved, how he anticipated danger, and how he kept calm under pressure. Every skill he showed her strengthened her confidence. Suddenly, a sharp shout echoed through the canyon. The soldiers had caught sight of something, a movement in the shadows, and were now searching more aggressively. Ahuli crouched low, pressing herself against the canyon wall, trying to disappear into the darkness. Her protector quickly scanned the soldiers' positions, then motioned for her to follow. They moved in silence, slipping between shadows, using every crevice and rock to stay hidden. The soldiers' voices grew louder, frustrated by the brief glimpse they had of someone but unable to find them. As they moved deeper into the canyon, Ahuli felt the weight of fatigue pressing on her muscles. Her legs ached from climbing and running, her stomach grumbled from lack of food, and the tension made every step exhausting. But her protector encouraged her to keep going, offering small gestures of reassurance, a hand to steady her, a quiet nod, a brief pause to rest. She realized that courage was not just about running or hiding. It was about endurance, patience, and trusting someone else to help you when you needed it most.
The canyon widened briefly, revealing a small stream cutting through the rocks.
The water was shallow but clear, and Ahuli knelt to drink. Her protector watched the surrounding cliffs carefully, eyes sharp, hands ready. Even this moment of relief was dangerous. One wrong move, and the soldiers could appear, and they would be caught. Ahuli drank slowly, savoring the water and the brief peace it brought.
Small towns had long memories, and news, whether settled or not, often stirred curiosity and conversation. Even though Tom and Molly had agreed on a solution for the irrigation pipe, the incident had already taken on a life of its own in the minds of the townspeople. Opinions, stories, and small exaggerations spread quickly, and before long, the situation became more than a private matter. It became a topic of community discussion, sometimes heated, sometimes sympathetic, but always present. Tom had spent his life managing challenges on the ranch: storms, broken fences, sick cattle, and crop failures. Yet, this incident, fueled by human emotion rather than natural disaster, felt different. It touched a deeper part of him: his pride, his sense of fairness, and his concern for how he was perceived. He understood the technical solution, the agreement about the irrigation pipe, but he could not stop thinking about what others in the town might be saying behind his back. Pride and reputation were important to Tom. To be seen as inflexible, even if only temporarily, was uncomfortable for a man who had spent decades earning respect quietly, through hard work rather than words. Molly, on the other hand, felt a different kind of pressure. While she had successfully negotiated the compromise, she could sense the scrutiny of the town. Her neighbors and local farmers watched her closely, sometimes offering help, sometimes offering judgment. She had expected challenges when she moved to Pine Creek, but the intensity of public attention surprised her. She knew that in a small town, a single conflict could define one's reputation for months, or even years. Despite this, she felt proud of herself for standing her ground respectfully, and she reminded herself that progress often required courage. The day after the compromise, a small group of local farmers approached Tom at the ranch.
She guided him to edible plants, showed him which roots could be dug safely, and indicated where small game might be found. Each lesson was a mix of demonstration and careful observation, teaching him more than he could have imagined. He marveled at her skill, realizing that her survival had depended on this knowledge and intuition for much longer than his own expertise with medicine had ever required. Nighttime offered quiet reflection. They would sit by the fire, listening to the forest and occasionally sharing small fragments of conversation. He told her about his past, his mistakes, and the reasons he had been forced into hiding. She listened intently, though words were few, nodding or gesturing when understanding seemed to dawn. He did not know the details of her own past, but he sensed her trust growing, the way she allowed him to share and still remain present without fear.
There was a moment one night that struck him profoundly. The woman, now strong enough to sit without assistance, reached for a small set of tools he had left on the table.
She mimicked his movements as he demonstrated a simple repair, her hands precise and deliberate. When she finished, she looked at him, her dark eyes bright with accomplishment. He felt a mix of surprise and admiration. She was not just learning, she was adapting, thriving, and taking initiative in ways that challenged his assumptions about her vulnerability. This partnership extended beyond survival. They began to anticipate each other's needs, creating a subtle flow of cooperation that allowed them to work efficiently without words. She would light the fire before he awoke, ensuring warmth in the cabin. He would prepare meals and leave them near her resting place when she returned from gathering water or herbs. Each gesture reinforced the fragile trust they had built. A trust forged in danger, necessity, and mutual respect. Heat during the day made movement difficult, and the nights were cold. Supplies were limited, and he had to improvise solutions constantly. Water for cleaning wounds was scarce. Bandages had to be washed and reused carefully, and food had to be prepared to provide nutrients without causing strain. Yet, every challenge reinforced his determination. He remembered why he had become a doctor in the first place. To help when it was hardest, to care when no one else could. The young woman's recovery became a symbol of that purpose. As the week went on, she began to walk short distances with support. Elias guided her carefully, holding her hand, reminding her to place her weight evenly, and encouraging her to breathe steadily. Her confidence grew slowly, and each successful step was celebrated quietly. The villagers cheered softly, proud of her progress, and grateful for Elias's guidance. In these moments, Elias felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had risked everything to save a life, and now he was witnessing the transformation that came with careful, compassionate care. During this time, Elias also reflected on his own journey. He had fled Boston, carrying shame and guilt for past mistakes. For years he had felt lost, a man running from himself. Yet now in the desert he realized that redemption was not about returning to a city, clearing his name, or regaining lost status. It was about action, integrity, and the quiet knowledge that he could still make a difference. Saving this young woman, teaching the villagers, and restoring health in a remote community gave him a renewed sense of purpose. He was reclaiming the part of himself that had been buried under fear and regret. The young woman, too, began to show subtle changes. Her eyes sparkled. More often, she laughed softly at small jokes or playful gestures, and her dependence on others lessened.
She gestured vaguely, her hand sweeping toward him, toward the garden, toward the life that had begun to feel brighter. It's been so long since I've felt hope, or excitement, or even a little happiness like this. Caleb turned to look at her, his expression serious yet tender. "Martha," he said, his voice calm and sure, "you don't have to be ready. You just have to be willing. I'm not here to rush you or change you. I'm here because I want to be with you, however that looks. No expectations, no apologies." Her eyes widened, and for the first time Martha felt the weight of doubt lifting. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever made her feel seen without judgment, without hesitation, without conditions. She realized that the fear she had carried for years, the fear of being too old, the fear of disappointing others, the fear of being hurt, was losing its power. She could allow herself to feel, to hope, to trust. They sat in silence for a while, letting the moment settle over them. Martha's mind wandered through memories of the past, the years she had spent protecting her heart, and the walls she had built around herself. And then she realized something extraordinary. Those walls were not permanent. She could take them down brick by brick and let someone in, not just anyone, but someone who truly respected her and cherished her. "Caleb," she whispered, a smile spreading slowly across her face. I think I want to try. I want to see where this goes, even if I'm afraid. I want to be with you." Caleb's smile was immediate and full of warmth. He reached over and took her hand gently, holding it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "That's all I could ever want to hear," he said. "We'll take it one day at a time, together." The relief and joy Martha felt in that moment were profound.
She felt a spark of hope. Perhaps they could continue moving through the desert, step by step, outsmarting the soldiers who pursued them so relentlessly. After the short break, they moved again. The path became more difficult. Rocks jutting out at odd angles, sharp edges threatening to trip them. Ahuli stumbled slightly, but her protector's hand steadied her instantly. "Careful," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. "Every step counts." She nodded, grateful for his presence. She realized that surviving was not just about hiding. It was about teamwork, about combining skill, courage, and trust. Without him, she might not have made it this far. Hours passed, and the sun climbed high into the sky. The desert heat became almost unbearable, pressing down on them like a heavy blanket. Sweat ran down Ahuli's face, stinging her eyes, but she pressed on. The canyon offered some shade, but the path was long and treacherous. Her protector led her through narrow ledges and hidden paths, constantly adjusting to avoid exposure. Every movement was careful, deliberate, and calculated. Ahuli felt herself growing stronger, more confident, learning from his every action. Suddenly, the soldiers appeared again, moving along the ridge above the canyon. Ahuli froze, pressing herself into the shadow, but her protector acted immediately. He grabbed her arm and guided her to a small crevice in the rock, barely wide enough for her to slip inside. He created a diversion by tossing a small stone down a narrow passage. The soldiers' eyes followed the noise and they moved toward it, giving Ahuli and her protector a brief but crucial moment of safety. Inside the crevice, Ahuli held her breath. Her protector whispered, "We have to keep moving. They will not give up." She nodded, understanding the urgency. Even with clever hiding and clever diversions, the soldiers' persistence was a constant threat.
They were friends, mostly, but they had concerns. "Tom," said Henry Lee, his voice calm but serious, "we all know you've been fair with Molly, but some people think you should have been stricter. They're talking about it in town, saying maybe you're letting your pride get in the way of what's yours." Tom sighed. He understood their point of view, but he also knew that fairness and compromise were not weaknesses. They were practical solutions. "I did what I thought was right," Tom said, brushing a hand over his hat. "I want to protect my land, yes, but I also want the town to see that disputes can be solved without anger. People will talk, Henry. That's how it is in a town like this. But I won't let gossip dictate my actions." Still, the words of his neighbors lingered. Even as Tom worked in the fields, mending fences and checking cattle, he felt the weight of the town's attention. Every movement seemed to be noticed. Even simple tasks, like feeding the chickens or adjusting a sprinkler, became moments where people might judge him, interpret his actions, or retell the story differently. Meanwhile, Molly was facing her own challenges. The work of expanding her irrigation system began in earnest. She had to carefully dig trenches, lay pipes, and ensure that the water would flow efficiently without disturbing the Harris Ranch. Every step required planning, patience, and attention to detail. But she also had to navigate the curiosity of neighbors and the subtle judgment that came from people who were invested in the story. Some offered help, others advice, and a few even volunteered to supervise the installation, adding to both encouragement and pressure. The community's involvement became a double-edged sword. On one hand, it demonstrated how supportive people could be, offering experience, guidance, and physical labor. On the other hand, it made the process more complicated.
Yet underlying this progress was an unspoken tension. Both knew the outside world was still dangerous. The forest held threats, and the woman's past enemies could still be nearby. Every movement was calculated, every decision weighed carefully. He recognized that her independence was not only a strength but a necessity, a way of ensuring she would survive even if circumstances turned against them. Respecting that independence became part of his own survival strategy, a lesson in humility and awareness. One afternoon, while walking near the edge of the forest, she stopped abruptly, raising a hand in a silent warning. He followed her gaze and saw signs of movement, fresh tracks in the soil, broken branches that suggested someone had passed that way recently. His pulse quickened. She gestured for him to stay low, her body tense, eyes scanning the forest. Together they crouched behind a fallen log, silent and watchful. The danger passed and they eventually moved on, but the moment reminded him of the precariousness of their situation and the necessity of their partnership. As weeks passed, subtle signs of connection began to appear. A shared glance, a small gesture, or the quiet acknowledgement of effort created a sense of companionship that neither had expected. The cabin, once a place of isolation and fear, had become a space where two people learned to rely on one another. They still had their differences, and communication remained limited, but the foundation of mutual respect had been laid. Toward the end of the 4th week, the surgeon reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. The woman, once wounded and wary, had regained her strength, her skill, and her confidence. She moved with purpose, spoke with clarity when necessary, and observed the world with intelligence and caution. Elias noticed how the community's care had helped her regain confidence, showing him that healing was a collaborative process. The villagers were no longer distant observers. They were active participants, learning, caring, and supporting. Elias felt proud, not only of his own efforts, but of the way the community had rallied to protect and help one of their own. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant colors across the desert sky, Elias sat quietly outside the small dwelling where the young woman rested. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. He thought about how far he had come, from the scandal in Boston to this remote settlement where his skills mattered more than ever. He realized that life offered second chances in unexpected ways. The desert, once a place of exile, had become a place of learning, growth, and healing. He had found meaning not in recognition, but in action. As days turned into weeks, the young woman's strength increased. She could walk short distances without assistance, eat meals independently, and even perform small tasks around the settlement. Elias continued to guide her, teaching careful movements and exercises to strengthen the leg. The villagers watched and learned, incorporating his instructions into their routines. A sense of normalcy returned, and with it, hope. The settlement had become not just a place of survival, but a place of recovery, resilience, and quiet joy. Elias also began to form connections with the villagers beyond Madison. He listened to their stories, learned about their traditions, and shared his own experiences in small, careful ways. They respected him not just for his skill, but for his humility and dedication. The bond he had created was mutual. He cared for them, and they cared for him.
She realized that love, connection, and happiness were not bound by age or societal expectation. What mattered was the sincerity of the heart, the willingness to take a risk, and the courage to embrace life fully. She felt lighter, freer, and more alive than she had in decades. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened naturally. There were no grand gestures or dramatic declarations, only small moments that built trust and affection. They shared long walks through the fields, picnics in the shade of old trees, and quiet evenings talking by the fire. Caleb helped with chores around the house and garden, always with patience and respect, and Martha found herself laughing more than she had in years. Each day brought new discoveries about each other, about life, and about the possibilities that still awaited her. Of course, the whispers from the town continued. Some neighbors would glance curiously, some would murmur, and some would offer polite but wary congratulations. But Martha no longer felt constrained by their opinions. She had learned that the world's judgments were not as important as the truth she felt in her own heart. Caleb's unwavering respect and honesty had shown her that she deserved joy, companionship, and love, and no one else's approval could change that. One crisp morning, Caleb suggested they ride horses along the ridge near her house. Martha had not ridden in years, but she felt a surge of excitement at the idea. As they guided the horses through the open fields, the wind brushing against their faces, Martha laughed freely, feeling the exhilaration of movement, freedom, and shared adventure. She realized that life had more to offer than she had ever allowed herself to imagine, and that she could embrace these experiences fully, without fear. It was during moments like these that Martha truly understood the depth of her feelings for Caleb.
Revival required constant vigilance, and there was no room for error. After a short rest, they emerged from the crevice and continued through the canyon. They reached a steep slope covered with loose rocks. Climbing it was dangerous. A single misstep could send them tumbling down. Ahuli's legs shook as she began the ascent, but her protector stayed close, guiding her hand by hand. He watched the slope ahead, warning her of unstable rocks and gaps. By step, they climbed higher, using every ounce of strength and focus. At the top of the slope, they paused to catch their breath. The canyon opened into a wide valley with more hills and hidden paths. Ahuli could see the tracks of the soldiers below, moving steadily but searching carefully. She felt a mix of fear and determination. The soldiers were relentless, but so were they. With her protector at her side, she believed they could continue to outsmart their pursuers. They moved carefully across the valley, using every rock, bush, and shadow for cover. Ahuli followed the protector's lead, learning to move silently to blend into the land and to anticipate danger before it appeared. Every so often she would glance at him, seeing the strength, skill, and courage that had kept them alive so far. She felt a growing bond, a deep respect, and a sense of gratitude that words could not fully express. The soldiers were close, and tension remained high. At one point, a branch snapped under Ahuli's foot. Her heart leapt, but her protector immediately reacted, signaling her to freeze. He moved quickly, creating a distraction that drew the soldiers' attention away. Ahuli held her breath, waiting until the soldiers passed, and then quietly followed him. Round. In despair, she realized that his actions had saved her life more than once. She trusted him completely, knowing that he would protect her no matter the risk. As the day wore on, the heat of the desert became more intense.